Hi everyone, welcome to this third video in a series of videos that I'm making about basics of supply chain management. Now in the first two videos we looked at what a supply chain is and the different views of process views of a supply chain. In this we'll talk about the different decision phases of a supply chain. What kind of decisions are made within a supply chain, what kind of time horizon are associated with these, time horizons are associated with these decisions, and well, how important are they? And that's what we'll talk about. So let's get into it. Now, the supply chain, there are three essential levels of decisions that you make. You have a strategic decision that you make based upon a supply chain strategy that you have, which is used either that or you are designing your supply chain anew or you're redesigning your supply chain. Then you have supply chain planning decisions, and of course you have operational decisions. Now, strategic decisions or design decisions are something that will affect your supply chain for the foreseeable future. So you're talking about multiple months, multiple years sometimes. And planning decisions are usually decisions that are made with a time horizon up to a year, and operational decisions are what do you do for the next day? What do you do for the next week? That sort of, so they are operational decisions, right? So now let's look at some strategic decisions. So these are the decisions about the configuration of the supply chain itself. How do you, so if you might either be designing a supply chain from scratch because you have a brand new company, or you're expanding to a brand new area and you want to know exactly, you want to set up your supply chain exactly in a certain way that you like, because you've done it in other similar places and it has worked for you. So you have strategic decisions that you have to make for supply chain, or you might also be redesigning your supply chain. Let's say that there is one company that has acquired another company. So there are two independent supply chains that are now merged together into a single one. Then you have to redesign the supply chain using the existing pieces, right? So in all of these cases, these are all strategic decisions that will affect the company over the long term, over multiple years. And and we'll talk about that. So a lot of things, for example, facility locations, modes of transportation, information systems, warehouse location. All of these things are, there are analytical models that you can use to optimize these decisions. And we'll talk about all of those in this class. Take a simple thing like, for example, there are all of these different villages somewhere in upstate New York, which have decided that the closest fire station is really far, and they would like to locate a fire station so that it is the fire trucks can come faster to houses within those villages, right? Then where exactly do you locate the fire truck, right? So some of these villages might be smaller than the others. Some of them might have houses that are easier to catch fire. So there are lots of different things that go into making these decisions. And how is the decision made? And again, like I said, there are some analytical methods, and we'll talk about those analytical methods as we go through the semester, right? Now, the other level of decision making is planning decisions. Once you've set the strategy, right? Before we move on to planning decisions, the important thing to remember about the strategic decisions is that you must always have some strategic objectives for the company, and the supply chain design must support those strategic objectives. For example, if the company has a strategy of, let's say, going green, they want to be environmentally friendly, reduce their carbon footprint, reduce the amount of raw materials or not raw material, amount of waste they produce. So there are certain things that the company wants to do. So if you're designing a supply chain with these things in mind, then the strategic decisions that you make are different. Say, for example, you have to acquire a fleet of trucks, right? Once you acquire a fleet of trucks, they are going to be with you for a while. Now, if you are going green, then you might acquire a fleet of electric trucks, as opposed to non-electric trucks if you did not have that as a strategic objective, right? So once the strategy is decided, the different levels of decisions that you make, each of them have to follow those strategic decisions. So planning decision, like I was talking about, is a medium to short term sort of decision where you're talking about what's going to happen within the next few months, maybe up to a year. And again, once you've decided what the strategy of the company is, and you've designed your supply chain, a few things might change within the planning stage. So this is where you plan exactly, well, when are we going to use this part of the supply chain versus this part of the supply chain? How exactly are goods going to move to the different stages in the supply chain? And so on. So those are the planning decisions. So which markets will supply which locations? Where will the inventories be built up? Timing and size of market promotions. All of these are, again, things that we're going to talk about in this class. We are going to talk about inventory management. We're going to talk about sales and operations planning, which is, again, part of supply chain planning as we go through this semester, right? And then finally, our operational decisions, which are day-to-day decisions. Again, if you set a strategic goal of going green, an operational decision might be something like the amount of printing that happens within the company has to be reduced by, say, up to 10% of what it was before. So only a few things can be printed, not everything can be printed. Then all of these trickle down to the operational level, where somebody sitting in an office, if they have to send the order requisition out, they might have to do it as an email rather than on paper, as they were doing before. No, you cannot completely remove paper with many companies, because whenever you're dealing with the government, you might need for stuff to be on paper rather than via email. So it cannot completely remove that, but you might have a goal of reducing it by 90%, right? And that's the idea. Now, one of the important things about about operational decisions that are day-to-day decisions that you make is that uncertainty is less, in the sense that it's very unlikely that the kind of uncertainty that you see when you make a strategic decision is not something that you see, because the time horizon is very short. Okay, and those are the different levels of decisions that you make. Now I'm going to end the video here. This concludes the introduction to supply chain portion of this course. Now, as we go further, so the textbook and even the PowerPoint that I've uploaded online has a lot more in it. So I want to quickly show you a couple of things. One is, there are examples of multiple supply chains that exist, and these are very useful for you to understand how the what we do over the next few weeks, right? We're going to talk about supply chain strategy. We're going to talk about transportation strategy and whatnot. So it is important for you to understand examples of existing supply chains, and also other projects and everything that you do for this class, right? So you have examples of Nokia and Ericsson, Zara's supply chain, Nike's supply chain within the United States and outside. Then you have Toyota's supply chain. Again, Toyota's supply chain is very useful. Now, they've also had to redesign some of their supply chain as they went from just gas cars to hybrid cars to electric cars. Now they're thinking about manufacturing hydrogen cell-based cars. So the supply chains are very different for each of these cars. And then, of course, you have Amazon. Amazon, again, had to redesign its supply chain as it grew, right? It went from just selling books to selling literally everything, right? Now they even have some brick and mortar stores. So they went from just online to brick and mortar. So how did that change? How did their supply chains change? And so on. So there's very, very interesting things in the textbook. Make sure that you read it, because they are useful for you to understand the rest of what we do through this semester. Okay. So I'm going to end this video here. And if you have any questions, do not forget to email me, and I will see you all in the next video. All right. Take care.